Welcome, everyone. My name is Marco Palladino. I'm the co-founder and CTO of Kong, and I'm here with Martin Casado, general partner at A16Z. I was really looking forward to having this conversation with Martin. Martin is a prominent investor in the Bay Area for A16Z, and today we're going to be speaking about AI, artificial intelligence. But before we go there, Martin, thanks for being here.
I'm very happy to be here.
So Martin, you are a famous investor today, prominent.
I don't know.
How did your journey start? What's your history?
So I feel like my career has gone in decades, and I've zoomed out every decade. So in my 20s, I was basically a student, academic, and then engineer, right? And so I did my PhD. I focused on infrastructure. And so kind of the level that I viewed the world in was like lines of code or papers written. And then in my 30s, I started a company called Nasira. So I zoomed out a little bit, and then kind of like the way I viewed the world was in products and businesses. And so I did that for 10 years. So we were in the networking space, a little bit lower than Kong in the API space, but not too much lower. Sold that to VMware, and then I ran that business until it was a relatively large business. And then in my 40s, so for the last 8 years, I've been an investor. So I zoom out even more, and then now what I work with is entire companies.
Yeah, you and I, we've been working together since 2016, I believe.
Yeah,
you are
10 years.
Yeah, an investor in Kong as well, back in the days.
Yes.
Back in the days. So you were a technologist, you became an investor. How did your perspective on technology change throughout this transition?
Well, it's very interesting because starting as a technologist, you really think about the power of technology to change, whatever you're working on. But as you build a company, and you know this very well because we've been talking about it for 8 years now, that it's very critical, even if you're building a technology, to find out how to get people to use it. And that's not really a technical problem. It's an education problem. It's a business problem. And so you have to become very holistic on how you think about technology beyond just even like the economics, but social aspects too. And so I do think becoming an investor, you see the experiment played out so many times, you get a deep appreciation of how varied the landscape is.
It's also a function of time. If you never give up and you keep trying and trying and trying, eventually you'll find the product market fit.
Yeah, true.
All right, so let's talk about artificial intelligence.
Yes.
I mean, this is a new technology. I mean, it's not new, but recently really it came out, right, in full force, and it's really changing the entire technological landscape. Yeah. What is your take on AI? What is your take on what's happening today in the world of technology?
Yeah. Okay, so let's level set. So, I probably took my first AI course in 1999. So like AI has been around for a very long time. And in fact, we've been using the term AI since the 50s, right? I'm not, like if you look at the history of computer science, we use it for expert systems, we used it for Lisp machines, we've used it for neural networks. So it's been around for a very long time. There's this very interesting question, which is, if AI has been around for a very long time, why have you never seen kind of a big shift so that everybody was using it? Like, why haven't you seen a bunch of AI native companies arise, and why has a lot of the value actually gone to the large companies like, say, Google or Facebook, right?
Yeah, what changed?
So this is a very interesting question, right? So it's been around for a while, but the people that have really used it or taken advantage of it really have been these big companies. And you can make the argument is because the economics of AI have actually been historically pretty bad. You've got to get a lot of data. You're competing with the human brain that's pretty good at stuff. It's actually kind of expensive to build the teams. It's gotten tough. And so it's been something that like large companies could take advantage of, but startups has had a very tough time to do. And I think what's really changed is the economics now make a lot of sense. And so one of the ways that I like to describe it is, imagine the case of like, these like Mid-Journey, like where you like enter like a prompt and like you get an image. So just consider that example. So the inference cost to generate an image, right? So if I put in, Martin in Italy drinking a margarita, even though he's in Italy, if I put that in, the inference cost to create that image is about 1/100th of a penny, right? 1/100th of a penny. So if you compare that to like having a designer do it, so a designer to make that image is what? Let's say $100 an hour and 1 hour, though it's probably a lot longer than that. So if you compare those, this is like 4 orders of magnitude difference, right? This is like 1/100th of a penny, 1 second versus that. On the other hand, if you look at traditional AI, like say self-driving cars, we've invested $75 billion in self-driving cars, and still the unit economics are not better than the human. So the current AI is tackling a set of problems with a new type of technology where the economics are just incredibly compelling. And that is the big difference.
Do you think it's also a function of hardware getting to a certain point in such a way that these use cases could be enabled by recent developments in GPUs or hardware or even machine learning techniques that we're using to develop this type of software?
So I think there's basically 2 things that happen. One of them is, yes, we got enough compute to create large enough models to be compelling on the training side, for sure. But there's another one, which is we just started applying them. Well, there was actually a key technical innovation, which is transformers, which came out of Google, which had this thing called self-attention, which says, okay, we're gonna see within a training window what is related. So there's actually a technical innovation as well, which I think is very legitimate. But I also think that a key unlock is finding use cases and businesses that make economic sense and applying them to those. And so I think it's kind of the convergence or the confluence of multiple things that have brought us to where we are today. And I'm gonna say one thing very quickly, which is this is no small thing, right? Like I mentioned before, how cheap it is to create an image. One way to think about it mentally is the microchip, the creation of the microchip, it brought the marginal cost of compute to 0. Like before we had microchips, we had people on desks in rooms calculating logarithm tables by hand to determine the trajectory of ballistics, right? And then we created the computer, which is about 10,000 times faster, and then we have the compute revolution. So the marginal cost of compute went to 0. The internet brought the marginal cost of distribution to 0. Like so before the internet, in order for me to give you software, I'd put it in a box and I'd ship it to you, which was like took days, right? And then after the internet, it was seconds. The price per bit went, down asymptotically, and that created the internet revolution. So you can think of AI, this current wave, as bringing the marginal cost of creation to 0, which is like I can create textures, audios, text, conversations, and the marginal cost of that's going to 0. And so this is very much an epochal time where I believe we're going to see kind of a whole new set of like companies and use cases come out of it.
So you mentioned microchips, you mentioned the internet,
Yes.
you mentioned like phenomenal innovations that change the world forever. And do you think AI is going to be one of them?
Well, so I think we got to be careful when we use the word AI, because AI has been around for a very long time, like I mentioned, right? But I think this version, let's call it generative AI or foundation models, I think absolutely it is the same level of epoch as the microchip, as the internet. People sometimes compare it to mobile, but I think it's bigger than that, which is anytime the marginal cost of something important goes to 0, you've got this kind of explosion that happens of like value and productivity on the other side of it. And we're already seeing that. I mean, let's just be very clear. We're not talking in the abstract here. There are multiple companies that have been created that are, growing economically, that have reached massive amounts of users in times faster than we've ever seen in the history. So this isn't some like hypothetical VC talking about what may happen. Like we're in the middle of it now, and it's incredibly exciting.
So what do you think are the best use cases for AI?
Well, here's the interesting thing. So one of the reasons that AI economics haven't worked in the past is because they tackle really hard problems or problems that humans are really good at, right? So for example, self-driving, if you get it wrong, it's a big deal, right? Because somebody gets hurt, right? And so like you have to invest a ton of time, right? And another thing is, if you're looking at something like self-driving, like perception, humans are really good at that. I mean, we've got this part of our brain that's been around for 100 million years that's been kind of navigating the real world and like, picking strawberries and evading leopards, right? And so to compete with that is very tough. And in that case, correctness is so important. If you get it wrong, it's a big deal. So what's really interesting and exciting about the current wave of Gen AI is the problems it tackles are things that we're not very, very good at. So it's solving problems like creativity and companionship. And the part of our brain that does that is only about 50,000 years old, right? So it's just not optimized at all. And so a lot of the use cases that it's been pushed to are things that we don't even think of computers doing, like it'll be your friend. It's like companionship, right? It's a brainstorming buddy. It's a coding buddy. It's a creative companion. It's something to help you generate new things. And so right now, a lot of the use cases are this new modality that we're not good at, so the economics are good, but it also kind of pushes computers into this entirely new area.
Yeah, I mean, this is a very interesting point of view. Perhaps in the past, we set the bar too high, right? We're trying to your point, to solve these very complex problems. Whereas now we reframed AI as this helper, let's say, of humankind,
Right.
and to help us. And do you think that, you mentioned creativity, you know, we know that AI can help with productivity.
Yeah.
Do you think that actually AI can be a good creative mind? Because, you know, we can see how it could be a great helper for productivity, do all these little tasks that nobody wants to do, but what about creative tasks?
I mean, I do. Listen, I tend to be a bit of an AI maximalist. But see, here's the way that I think about it. Let's take the continuum from a computer to Einstein, right? What are the stops along the way? So you can go from a computer to a cat. I think that's actually a very hard problem that we haven't solved. Like, we do not know how to make a computer navigate in an economic way the real world with the efficiency that a cat does. We just don't. This is why, like, self-driving today, like we're getting there, but the unit economics aren't like what a human being would do. Like, it's not competitive with, like, say, Lyft or Uber or something. So computer to a cat, we're still working on that problem. We're not there. Then you can go from a cat to an average human. I think that's what we've solved, right? And so like it can do language processing. It can do creativity. It can come up with stories. And to me, it's fully creative. It does real language processing. It understands natural languages. But then there's a question to go from the average human to Einstein, right? To go set-to-set reasoning, determine something new. That I don't believe it can do, because these things are all based on next token prediction, right? Which is, it takes the corpus of, you know, whatever humans have done on the internet, and it just kind of predicts the next thing. So it's very good at kind of giving you the mean or average output, but it's not giving you, you know, like something that nobody's ever thought of before. At least it doesn't seem to be the case. So my belief is, yes, it's creative for some definition of creativity. I think a lot of our creativity is mean creativity. We kind of reformulate what we've heard in the past. But I don't think it creates Einsteins out of average people. I think that requires humans.
But you think that we could teach AI how to think? Not what to think, but how to think. And based on the how, automatically come to deductions that perhaps can create new science that hasn't been discovered yet.
I think we've got to be very careful when we use these types of words, just because, like, they're not very well defined. And what I believe is it can definitely make inferences that humans have never made before based on the corpus of human thought that it's read, right? So I think that what it really does is it you know, we give it a bunch of, like, every book ever written, every movie ever done, and based on that information, it can make inferences that are within that data set. That said, I don't think it can do set-to-set reasoning. I don't think it can then make some extrapolation that's well outside of the data set. I think that the outputs that it provides are pretty, you know, are a product of what it was fed into. And so again, I think in the continuum between a computer and Einstein, I think it goes between a cat and an average human. I don't think it goes from the average human to Leonardo da Vinci. I think that that's something we don't know how to do. And so I'm not ready to say we've gotten to AI, we just throw more computers on it and we have AGI, and we have something that's more powerful than the human. I don't see any indication that that's the case.
So looking at the next 20 years,
Yeah.
what, just to make it real, right? What are the industries that you think will be shaped or revolutionized with the introduction of AI? What are some practical examples, perhaps in enterprise organizations or video games or any industry that you can think of?
Yeah.
You know, how do you think those industries will change?
Well, this is the great thing about these epochal times in our industry, is like, you always think you can predict what's going to happen, but you never really know, right? Like, I remember the early days of the internet. Like, you know, we had all of these stupid ideas of, like, what's going to happen. And then you ended up with Yahoo and Google and Amazon and Netflix. I'm telling you, like, we didn't really know what that was going to look like at the time. And so I think the predominant use cases, we have no idea. We don't. But standing for where we are now, I think we've got a good idea that, like, probably every bit of content is going to be generated. Probably every pixel is going to be generated. Probably every soundbite is going to be generated in some sense. I mean, if you take this to the extreme, I mean, you know, you can make a AAA game today with, you know, $200 million in 3 years, like a AAA video game, like a very sophisticated video game. But there's not one component of that video game that you can't do with a generative model today. Like the 3D models you can definitely create, the textures you can create, the voices you can create, the images you can create, the stories you can create, etc. Right? So it seems to me we're going to be in this world where there's a million companions and a millions of friends that have got infinite patience and they want to help you out, and they can generate a lot of things, and and that's going to open up a lot of use cases and possibilities that I don't even deign to be able to predict, but it's clearly going to be huge.
So we're seeing lots of AI talk, right? Yeah. And everybody is trying to figure out what's the best way to approach AI and start integrating AI within their own organizations or within their own applications and use cases. What do you think is the right approach? What do you suggest an organization to do in order to start leaning into AI?
Well, I think this is funny. The enterprise is always kind of like the last to get it. So I remember, I know I talk about the internet a lot, but I'm going to talk about it again. Like, I remember when Sun Microsystems banned the browser.
Oh, wow, I did not know that. I did not know that.
This is like the classic thing is like, oh, people don't get work done. It's going to take you to unsavory sites, etc. Right? And so you have these new technologies and they're super disruptive, and then it takes a long time for the organization to catch up. Like, remember, like mobile, like you can't take your mobile phone to work. Remember the cloud, you can't use AWS. And so it's almost like the individual gets it before the enterprise in almost every case. This is absolutely the case with AI, and we're seeing it happen today. So for example, listen, I work at Andreessen Horowitz. It's a venture firm. We're very forward-leaning. We use a lot of technology. And if you ask the question, does Andreessen Horowitz as a firm use AI? The answer is sort of, like, we try, but listen, we don't have a lot of organizational operationalization around it. Like, we don't really have the run books and the operating procedures. So kind of, but not really. But if you ask the question, do the individuals in Andreessen Horowitz use AI? The answer is yes. Everybody does. All the time. All of us use ChatGPT, all of us use Midjourney, like we all use it all the time. And I think that the most important thing, if you work in an enterprise, is to understand this is exactly how the adoption cycle is going to happen. Your users are going to use it, they're going to use it for productivity, and you better catch up. And don't be like Sun Microsystems in 1999 and ban the browser. It's stupid, but also you need to try and catch up and incorporate it.
Yeah, so your suggestion is to not be defensive, rather to embrace it and figure out a way to make it work.
Yeah, I think you need to be realistic that you don't have the procedures internally to manage, what does it mean to data governance? What does it mean to regulations? What is it you have to be realistic about that, but you also have to be realistic that people are going to use it. And so I think you kind of need to meet the users where they are on this, and 100%. I think a mistake though is to be like, we're going to internalize this in central IT, and we're going to have an AI strategy, and then it's disconnected from the actual use cases, because these are secular movements. They're organic movements. They start with the people. And so, just like the mobile phones, I think you have to work very much with the individuals of the org to get there, as opposed to somehow think this is another centralized vendor sort of thing.
Understood. And so when it comes to AI, there is a big topic of discussion right now. AI can be good. AI could be evil. Yeah. How what's your point of view on this?
I mean, I think it's overblown. So I just read Walter Isaacson's book on CRISPR, right? And so this is kind of the Jennifer Doudna story or whatever. I'm like, okay, so what is CRISPR? CRISPR is basically a virus, which, these things have been around for 1 billion years, killing life. And then it allows a virus to go in and edit a DNA sequence, right? And if it edits the DNA sequence, then that could change the human genome, and then the human race forever could be changed as a result of that. And this has been around for a while. And you know what the United States and the regulators said when it came up? This is a great opportunity. We'll study it. We're going to use it for good. And now we've got professors, and we use it in medicine, and it's been a net good, right? And this is something where you could very easily argue, there's some potential sharp edges there. What blows my mind about the discussion on AI safety is AI has none of those. It's a computer. It's a program. It does next token prediction. It can't edit the human genome. It can't disobey the laws of physics. And I feel like we've kind of preemptively thrown up our hands and said oh, this stuff is really dangerous, right? And so my strong...
Well, what do you think is that? Why are we coming Why are we coming up to this topic with such a negative viewpoint instead of a positive viewpoint?
That's great. So my theory is that we've built out so much infrastructure. So I feel like we kind of got flat-footed with the internet a bit, especially the government did, where it kind of got away from us, and like there was a lot of implications with social networking and with cyber, and there was also this kind of notion of asymmetry where we were more vulnerable because we were more advanced. So we built up all of this machinery to deal with it, and now that machinery needs a job. And so like this is the next thing. And so I feel like it's even changed the posture of the United States. I feel like before, like anytime there was something new, whether it's nuclear or CRISPR or whatever, we'd embrace it. And we'd say, we're going to be the best in the world at this, And as an industry, we'd embrace it and we'd use it for good and we would manage it. And of course, regulation is incredibly important, but it was part of the discussion. And now I feel we have this new posture, which I call preemptive surrender. Which is like, there's this great thing that has this potential of doing all of this great good, and we're going to regulate it out of existence before we really engage it. And so I think we learned the wrong lessons from the internet. I think we built up all this machinery to regulate it, and like now we're applying it at a problem before we have a full understanding of the implication.
Especially because we don't operate in a silo. So if there are countries that may be more permissive and some that may not be as permissive,
of course,
and the ones that are more permissive will just get an edge on these new technologies.
Yeah, and listen, I use the United States as an example. This is a global thing. I just feel like there's so many, I think the EU is just as much to blame. I just feel like we're in this very strange place where we've got something that's clearly beneficial for productivity, clearly beneficial to individuals, clearly can be used for a net good. I mean, it has the potential to be as disruptive as the microchip to the internet, which has changed the way we live, I would argue very much for the better. And then all of a sudden we're scared of our own shadows. And so I'm hoping we kind of get past that and really start focusing on kind of building this amazing future that we're all looking forward to.
Very nice, very nice. So we're here at API Summit.
Yes.
The theme of this summit is APIs.
Yes.
And as we all know, APIs are pretty much everywhere. As a matter of fact, APIs are also a significant component that allows AI to be smart and intelligent.
Yes.
So what do you think is really the role of AI and APIs together? How do you think these two will evolve over time?
Yeah, well, there's a very simple way to think about it. Ready? With AI, so right now we have, say, 8 billion people, and let's say 4 billion of them are online. I'm just making up some numbers, right? With AI, for every person, there could easily be 100 AIs, right? So we go from 4 billion to 400 billion, and every one of those AIs is going to want to use computers and want to be online. And are you going to give those AIs a keyboard, a monitor, and a mouse? No. They're all going to interact via APIs. And so in as much, like right now, the lingua franca really, for us to interact with like the cyber world is a keyboard, right? Going forward, it's certainly an API, and the predominant interaction is going to be from our AI friends and the agents and everything else like that. And so if you don't have an API strategy, you need one. And if you think that, for your website, wherever your product is, that the user in the future is going to be a human, it's almost certainly not. It's almost certainly going to be an AI. So, these things cannot be disentangled. What does Augie like to say? You can't say API without AI.
The more AI, the more API.
That's perfect.
Oh yeah. So no, he's great at coming up with these type of sentences.
Yeah. Very clever.
as you know. Yeah. So so that's phenomenal. So we spoke about the importance of AI, the use cases of AI. We spoke about AI being perhaps the beginning of a new cycle, a new industrial revolution, so to speak, in the world. Is there anything else you would like to add on the topic?
Yeah, so just one more thing. It's not to do with enterprise, and it's it's something we don't normally talk about. But what to me is so exciting about this is it's the first time in a long time that I can remember that like creativity and art really has entered the picture, and it really the AI, to the conversation that we've had previously, it's not the best at being always correct. It's not the best at and that's fine. Like we've got formal languages for that. We've got computers for that. But it is phenomenal at changing natures of expression and coming up with new ideas. And so you asked whether it can be creative. I say absolutely it can be creative, but not only that. I think that this disruption isn't just going to be this kind of mechanistic compute world that we live in, but it's going to push into very, very new domains. And I think that includes art, and I'm just here for it.
Now, I'm very excited about all that's going to happen with AI. I think that I'm really looking forward to the time when AI is able to get out of the comfort zone, the boundaries of knowledge that it already knows, and being able to sort of be AI 2.0, where it can figure out really new concepts, new science, to our discussion previously. I think that's going to be the next, perhaps, the next big leap in AI, because that's going to change everything again one more time.
Yeah, and it's an open question if it can do that already or not, and if not, when is it going to get there? But here's one thing I will say, which is, listen, I think I'm like I think I would have been very happy in the 1700s during the Age of Discovery, right? And in the Age of Discovery, like you didn't know what the universe, you didn't know that much about the world, so you'd get in ships, or whatever, and you'd go explore it. And then we kind of figured out a lot of stuff, and we started building a whole bunch. We've been doing that for the last couple hundred years. One thing that the AI is almost certainly going to cause us to do as a race is it's very good at reasoning and very good at processing for data that's already collected. You feed it all the data that's already collected, and then it does a bunch of reasoning. Right? And so how do you make it more powerful? You have to collect more data, right? And that's where this entire thing is going. So I think we're on the cusp of, a renaissance in discovery and data collection again. Because listen, you can keep throwing more compute at these things. At some point, those scaling laws are going to disappear. We've already consumed all of the internet, every movie, every book, pretty much all of the data within a factor or two we've already started consuming. So now it's time to go collect more data. And listen, I do think this is where we're heading.
Well, as a matter of fact, let me ask you one more question before we end here, now that you're bringing up this topic. So it is a point of conversation, a topic of conversation right now, that AI is violating copyright because it's pretty much crawling and pulling all this information everywhere and assimilating this information to do what it does. And now some organizations, some entities are mindful of this, and perhaps they may put in place enforcements to prevent AI from being able to do that. So how will AI gather new information if we prevent that from happening? Do you think it's even enforceable to stop AI from doing that?
Hey, I feel information is a one-way thing where it just wants to get out. And and once it's out, you can never put it back in. And it's kind of like this finite good in a way. Unlike oil, whenever people say data is oil, but the thing is, when you extract oil and then you burn it and then the oil's gone, you got to extract more oil. The reality is data is kind of it lives forever. And so I think in the long run, the information has to be out there to be consumed. We generate a ton of information. It's going to be using these models. Listen, I'm not a lawyer. I know this, but I've been around the internet long enough to know that these kind of, derivative work, scuffles happen all the time. I remember what happened with YouTube. I remember when it happened, during the old DVD times. And we'll work our way through it, and we always work our way through that. So I don't worry about that slowing down progress. I also don't worry about somehow data becoming siloed, because I know it wants to get out and to be used. And so, listen, we've fought all these battles before. They'll come up again. We're going to hand-wring about it. But at the end of the day, listen, I think the data will be out there. The AI will use it. It's going to create amazing derivative stuff, and we're all going to benefit from it.
Well, thank you, Martin. This was a fantastic conversation. I think we're living in very exciting times.
Yeah.
So we're all looking at what's going to come up when it comes to AI in the world. Well, thank you for being here.
Very happy to do it.
Thank you. Bye.